Moving on to Terah introduction. So this is, it talks about the film. Sorry, something came up. It talks about the film, but also it talks about cinema culture, right? And so about 11,962 theaters are serving 12 million people a day during this period. And Chopra, when the book was written, and Chopra also discusses scalpers, right? And I completely forgot this, but when I first moved back to South Korea, there were still scalpers. There was a different cinema culture before, because cinemas were still being independently run, and before everything kind of switched over to the sort of Cineplex theater system. See, I'm just not here today. Which was nice, and I remember as a young man really liking that stuff. But now in hindsight, there is that kind of missing the things that used to be there, like that culture, right? And I remember even buying tickets off of scalpers a few times, or with my dad. And this sort of major point that that scalpers are still selling tickets, right? To DDLJ, right? In the 2000s, they talk about this sort of communal experience, which I think is really important. That it indicates a different kind of culture of cinema, at least with this film, right? You're not going, but we do this. They, people in the U.S. do this as well, right? When people will go to a film and they all know the beats. It's not about watching it for the first time. It's about kind of enjoying being in company with other people who have a sort of intense relationship with the film, right? Of course, the major example is Rocky Horror Picture Show. But even I remember going to see, I think it was a Star Trek, and there were people in costume, Star Wars films, absolutely, right? And there are people that are seeing it again and again and again. According to a scalper named Kundan, and this is a really important point, this is on page 3, people go to DDLJ. So this is real, I think this is real critical insight as to the popularity of the film, but also to just to cinema in general, quote unquote, to do time pass, to pass their time in an inexpensive, air-conditioned, entertaining way, right? So it's not just about the film, it's a type of experience in a particular sort of society basically we're talking about again, leisure time in capitalism, where we're not in agrarian or feudal culture where you're, even then there's leisure, but because of things like industrialization, people have a lot more time, a lot more, disposable income. How do you pass the time? That's why it's not a coincidence that, cinema and other visual culture emerges in modernity and industrialization the way that it does, right? So we're talking about, again, bourgeois, having disposable income, but also, we know that cinema was a decidedly working class, a working class pastime too. And so the fact that a lot of these people, and this goes for a lot of different cultures as well, I'm thinking back in Korea as well, if you think about internet cafes, similar thing, just cafes in general, there's air conditioning. People might not have all air conditioning at home, or it might be too expensive to run all the time, right? And so it's you can kill time, pass time, right? You can spend money, you can enjoy it, and you can enjoy the other kind of what's the word I'm looking for? God damn it. Anyways, it doesn't matter. Yeah. So India, at least according to this book, and I think it is correct, so that we do have a citation. The largest producer of films, 800 films annually. Just to give you an example, a film, a national cinema that has a healthy output is under 200 films. Like I know Korea is like around 100 or so every year, and that's a year, you know. And I don't know what the number will be for the U.S., but it would be worth looking at. The center being 200 from Mumbai, right? Bollywood located in Bombay, Hindi cinema. Generally spectacles with 250 in production at any given time. Almost all musical romances. So to move on to the kind of conventions, right, and expectations of Bollywood, specifically, so we're talking about like the Bombay Hindi cinema. And we know this to a certain degree, that there has to be a love story and there has to be a song, right? And this is what's so fascinating, right, is that it's box office suicide and or it's considered an art film if it doesn't have those two things. That's all it takes. And this might seem kind of strange to us, but if those of you have watched Robert Altman's The Player, which is a film that I often show in my classes, especially Intro to Cinema, there's this great point where they talk about the sort of unspoken rules of Hollywood, where it's like, you need this, and this. The main character, played by Tim Robbins, kind of goes over a list. He's a producer. And it is. It's like, if you don't have, let's say, big stars, if you have a difficult to understand storyline without, like, you know, that's ambiguous without a happy ending, it's no different. It's either box office suicide or it's an art film. It's something that, so like to think that, like, don't for a second think that, you know, Indian audiences are, you know, somehow less sophisticated than the U.S. I think we're just different versions of the same thing. On 5, I think this kind of speaks to me. Chopra talks about how the Bollywood film relentlessly mixes genres and styles. Abrupt shifts in location, logic, tone, and temper are natural. It's natural for it to be all over the place. It's natural for it to kind of shift gears constantly. This is something that I find to be like really unforgiven in the US, is that everything has to be kind of like singular and consistent, right? And I do think that it's something we're thinking about. Like, I think we're much less forgiving when it comes to kind of a film being, let's say, a little bit more elastic. I think interestingly, I think one place where Americans are used to this and even open to it is with anime, with Japanese cartoons, which I'll probably do a class on at some point once all this is, if this ever gets over. Because those have like tonal shifts, genre mixtures, all sorts of things, and people seem to be kind of okay with it. They do, so Chopra mentions on 6, sociologist Assis Nandi talking about why it's so it's like that. Why Bollywood is like that. It made me think of the way that a lot of people talk about Thai food, and again to make that kind of cultural movement, but really to try and do so to like bring, you know, different kind of cultures in continuity with one another. But just to read that block quote in the middle. Popular film ideally has to have everything. From the classical to the folk, from the sublime to the ridiculous, and from the terribly modern to the incorrigibly traditional, an average normal. Bombay film has to be, to the extent possible, everything to everyone. It has to cut across the myriad ethnicities and lifestyles of India and even of the world that impinges on India. So it's this idea of balance, right, a sort of mixture, and also because it has to speak, it has to kind of interpolate everyone, and in that sense it's no different from Hollywood, right? Hollywood tries to do the exact same thing, it's just that what people expect are a little bit different in the US than they are from India. DDLJ and the expatriate national, right? So a new type of protagonist, right? And Khan, by the way, the actor who plays the main character, like to this day is this huge superstar. But what Chopra refers to as the NRI, or non-resident Indian, right? Between 8 and 10, there's a lot of talk about the sort of cosmopolitanism, right? The fact that, you know, it's like featuring England to the degree that the film does. So it's speaking, right, to these kind of international what's the word I'm looking for? Sort of desire that the film is sort of speaking to, like the kind of resonance, or like just even see Indians abroad, right? But also how like the foreign, like the relationship of like the foreign other, how the other can be, and like how the film is sort of, you know, rejecting sort of previous stereotypical characters. The interesting, really kind of interesting shift in Indian romance on 11, that it's actually moving. What part of what the appeal of the film apparently is this idea that it's actually going in the reverse direction, where you actually have a very cosmopolitan expatriate, but he's like a very traditional boy, right? So it's like that, like meeting a new kind of balance or mixture, right? As opposed to being, you know, this kind of like sort of youngster that, like, you know, the older generations can't understand, right? Like a young Turk. That's not what's happening. Finally, Chopra talks about how this film was crucial for Bollywood's international success, with the major markets being US and Canada, UK and Europe, the Gulf states, and then finally smaller markets including Fiji, South Africa, Singapore, and Sri Lanka, mostly consisting of expats, expatriates, but still, you know, and I think more and more, I would be curious to see what like the current numbers are in terms of how these films are being watched. So that's our unit on Indian cinema. We have 2 weeks left. So yeah, let's keep that energy going on the discussion board. I'm really happy with that. Again, please let me know if you need anything from me. Stay safe, take care, and I will talk to you guys soon.